What is Donald Trump thinking as he approves an $825 million arms sale to Ukraine? Is this a step toward peace, or has it thrown a wrench into the fragile peace process? With over 3,000 Iranian missiles included in this massive deal, can we trust that it won't escalate the conflict further? And why does it seem like Trump's administration is caught in a whirlwind of confusion and incompetence? In the meantime, please subscribe to my channel, HotPoint, give it a like and leave a comment of at least 7 words, and if you feel like it, share this video with others. It will really help my channel. Thank you, and let's keep going. The situation is dire, and the stakes are incredibly high. Carolyn Leavitt, the White House press secretary, recently stated that neither Russia nor Ukraine is ready for peace. But is this truly the case, or is it a convenient excuse for a government that seems to be grasping at straws? The constant shift in rhetoric from Trump and his team paints a picture of disarray. One day there are threats, the next there are warm words about friendship with Vladimir Putin. This is not a strategy. This is a display of incompetence and inconsistency. The president appears unable to forge a coherent understanding of the situation. He is being pulled in multiple directions by the weight of his own promises to end the war, the overwhelming fatigue of the American public, the defense contractors eager to profit from arms sales, neoconservatives who profit from the war while pushing their ideological agenda, and European leaders who are all part of this muddled scenario. This mix of war hawks and hostages of the military-industrial complex has resulted in a lack of direction. As a result, Trump's administration has failed on multiple fronts, especially when it comes to establishing peace. Peace isn't something that materializes on its own or is automatically upheld by some grand design. It requires intentional effort, a solid framework that must be clearly articulated and justified. Negotiations are essential, not just a brief 2-hour meeting. Unfortunately, none of this is happening right now, and it's disheartening to witness such incompetence at the helm of the United States. Is there any hope for change, or are we due for more conflict? The contract stipulates that 1,000 Iranian missiles will be sent to Ukraine each year. The messages from Trump's administration are chaotic. On one hand, they promise not to allow American weaponry to strike Russia from Ukrainian soil, yet on the other, they make significant commitments to Ukraine. The volume of missiles they plan to supply sends a contradictory signal to Russia. While I may not be a military expert, it seems clear that this will prolong the war. We are faced with a reality in which Ukraine is being governed by a small group of individuals acting corruptly under the guise of wartime laws, disconnected from the needs and desires of the Ukrainian people, who overwhelmingly want this war to end. The situation has devolved into a struggle for power among factions in the US, Europe, and Ukraine, with the only party genuinely seeking an end to the conflict being Russia. Russia's conditions for peace, which include Ukraine's neutrality and territorial concessions, seem reasonable given the context of over a decade of conflict that began with the US-backed coup in February 2014. A proposal that respects Ukraine's sovereignty while ensuring the safety of the majority of its territory should serve as a basis for negotiations. Unfortunately, we are moving further away from this goal, primarily because we lack a leader capable of crafting a clear strategy, adhering to it, and negotiating accordingly. The forecast is grim. More fighting, heightened escalation, and further devastation. Recent powerful missile and drone strikes on Kyiv by Russia serve as a reminder that the violence is far from over. Such actions not only escalate the situation, but also bring with them the looming risk of a nuclear confrontation. This has always been a possibility, and it seems there is little will to step back from this dangerous precipice. No matter how incompetent the U.S. leadership may appear, I must place Keir Starmer, Merz, and Macron on the same pedestal of egregious incompetence. None of them seem to reflect the interests of their nations, the security of Europe, or the reality of the situation. Europe is now frantically discussing the creation of a buffer zone, which they claim is part of a so-called peace agreement. Yet, as you mentioned, there are no genuine negotiations occurring with Russia. The idea of dialogue has been dismissed outright, especially in Europe, where leaders seem adamantly opposed to even considering talks with Russia. The concept of a buffer zone is merely a way to impose their version of what a resolution should look like. This rapid alignment with U.S. interests regarding arms transfers raises questions about Europe's commitment to peace. It appears as if they are doubling down on a strategy that may not bear fruit. The fundamental issue is the complete absence of dialogue between Europe and Russia. The Russians are articulating critical issues related to NATO, their borders, and the threat posed by American missile systems to their security. However, the European response has been to demonize Putin, labeling him as a monster and an insatiable expansionist bent on conquering the rest of Europe. This narrative is not only misleading but fundamentally flawed. Many European leaders in private conversations have expressed thoughts that starkly contrast with their public statements. This discrepancy indicates recklessness, as they seem hell-bent on prolonging the conflict for reasons unknown to the wider public, even when they acknowledge the truth among themselves. Figures like Starmer and Merz exude a distinct aura of warmongering without uttering a word about peace negotiations. Germany in particular carries a heavy burden of responsibility. It is not just the largest economy in Europe. It is a nation that invaded the Soviet Union during World War II, resulting in the deaths of 27 million people. Germany reunified on the promise of not expanding NATO and was once a guarantor of the Minsk Agreement, a commitment it has notably failed to uphold. The lack of recognition from leaders like Merz regarding these historical perspectives is troubling, especially as he calls for Europe to prepare for war. We find ourselves in a situation reminiscent of the lessons we learned in history classes about destructive tragedies like the First World War. It's shocking to witness the utter irresponsibility displayed by political leaders when there exists a clear necessity for dialogue, for negotiation. Their refusal to even consider sitting down at the table and attempting to reach an agreement is astonishing. These events unfold against a backdrop of immense suffering and loss, much like what we see happening in Gaza, where the horrors of genocide are unfolding. As we navigate through these turbulent times, it becomes increasingly crucial to advocate for peace and understanding, rather than fueling the flames of conflict. The world is watching, and the consequences of inaction are far too grave to ignore. Is Donald Trump complicit in genocide while the United States remains in a state of denial? How can a country that champions human rights support mass killings in Gaza? What does it mean for global power dynamics when nations like India and China draw closer while the U.S. isolates itself? The recent actions of the Trump administration reveal a troubling lack of interest in stopping the violence in Gaza. Instead, it seems to support these atrocities, which can only be described as genocide with the backing of the United States. This is not a mere oversight. It is an active participation in violence against those deemed unworthy, those who don't fit into a particular religious or ideological box. This tragic situation unfolds as the U.S. government silences Palestinian voices, preventing their representatives from attending the United Nations in September to advocate for Palestinian recognition. The hypocrisy is staggering. While the U.S. engages in what many call genocidal warfare, it simultaneously seeks to stifle the very voices that dare to demand justice. As tensions rise globally, the U.S. finds itself embroiled not only in the Gaza crisis but also grappling with the complexities of the Ukraine conflict. These events occur with an alarming lack of strategic foresight. Pundits, including Peter Navarro, a staunch critic of China and current Trump advisor on trade, have raised alarms about the shifting allegiances between powerful nations. India, China, and Russia are reportedly strengthening their ties, shifting the balance of global power. The ongoing war in Ukraine is often framed as a conflict dictated by U.S. interests, yet it may also be seen as a potential catalyst for broader global unrest. Navarro's remarks on India highlight the dire consequences of the U.S.'s foreign policy decisions. He criticizes India for its high tariffs, suggesting that American consumers and businesses suffer as a result. Yet it's important to recognize the larger picture. India's growing relationship with China and Russia could have dramatic implications for U.S. hegemony. As these nations come together, the message is clear. The world is moving toward a multipolar order, and the United States is slowly becoming isolated. This shift is underscored by the diplomatic activities between Brazil, India, China, and Russia. High-level meetings among defense and foreign ministers signal a new era of cooperation that could undermine U.S. influence. The implications for the global economy, especially concerning the U.S. dollar, are profound. As America's standing weakens, so does its ability to dictate terms on the world stage. The conflict in Ukraine, coupled with the situation in Gaza and escalating tensions with Iran, further complicates the U.S.'s position in international relations. Polling data reflects a troubling trend for Trump and his administration. With approval ratings hovering around 37% and disapproval rates exceeding 55%, it's clear that Trump's grip on domestic support is tenuous at best. His policies are leading not just to a loss of international standing, but also to dissatisfaction at home. The illusion of control is fading, and the reality is that the U.S. is losing its grip on the global narrative. Historically, the U.S. has dominated international discourse, but that era appears to be coming to an end. The recent developments are indicative of a broader, more complex reality, one where the U.S. represents only a fraction of the global population. With roughly 10% of the world's populace residing in the United States and the European Union combined, the notion that they can dictate terms to the rest of the world seems increasingly outdated. The imposition of tariffs and sanctions is not a show of strength, it's a sign of desperation. As the ongoing crisis in Gaza unfolds, the overwhelming majority of the United Nations member states support recognizing Palestine, illustrating America's growing isolation. With only a handful of allies standing alongside it, the U.S. finds itself increasingly at odds with global sentiment. This isolation is a dangerous path, leading to a retreat into a bubble where only select voices are heard and dissenting opinions are silenced. The question remains, what are the long-term implications of this isolation for the United States? As the world moves into a multipolar reality, the U.S. must confront the inconvenient truth of its diminishing power. It can no longer operate under the assumption that its interests dictate the global agenda. The harrowing consequences of violence and destruction will continue to resonate, underscoring the urgent need for a reevaluation of American foreign policy. In this rapidly changing landscape, the need for a more nuanced and collaborative approach becomes evident. The world has evolved, and so must the United States if it hopes to regain its footing on the global stage. The current trajectory, marked by violence, isolation, and misunderstandings, is not sustainable. Without a fundamental shift in perspective and strategy, the U.S. risks becoming a relic of a bygone era, one that could lead to further chaos and instability. The path forward will require humility, cooperation, and a recognition of the interconnectedness of our global community. How can 2 million people in Gaza suffer while the world remains indifferent? What does it say about the state of global leadership when the presence of nuclear weapons is overshadowed by a lack of basic decency in our shared existence? How long will Washington cling to the illusion of control over global affairs before acknowledging the dangerous disconnect from reality? The humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza is not just a statistic. It represents the plight of millions of lives caught in turmoil. The gravity of the situation only intensifies when considering the chilling reality of nuclear arsenals looming over fragile political landscapes. This intersection of a humanitarian disaster and the threat of nuclear conflict underscores an urgent need for more than just a shift toward a multipolar world. There is a fundamental requirement for a renewed commitment to human decency, cooperation, and respect for life itself. Unfortunately, it seems that the United States has yet to fully embrace this essential principle. The internal failures to foster a sense of shared humanity reflect not merely a strategic misalignment, but rather a broader disconnect from the world's pressing realities. The prevailing mindset in Washington, which still operates under the outdated notion that it can unilaterally dictate the terms of global order, is increasingly hazardous. This belief, rooted in a delusion of omnipotence, risks exacerbating existing conflicts rather than contributing to their resolution. While the geopolitical landscape continues to evolve, the priorities should shift toward fostering mutual understanding and respect among nations. Acknowledging the existence of diverse perspectives is crucial, especially when lives are on the line. The governance of international relations cannot rest solely on the shoulders of one nation, no matter how powerful it may perceive itself to be. Instead, it must be a collective effort, emphasizing diplomacy, empathy, and shared responsibility. In this context, the failure to act with integrity and compassion becomes glaringly evident. The consequences of this failure are not merely abstract, they manifest in the suffering of real people, whose voices are often drowned out by the cacophony of political rhetoric. It is essential for leaders, particularly in Washington, to recognize that their decisions carry weight and can have devastating effects far beyond their borders. As the world stands at a crossroads, the urgent call for a new paradigm in international relations is clear. A shift towards recognizing our shared humanity could pave the way for a more peaceful and equitable global community. The stakes have never been higher, and the need for genuine accountability and moral clarity in leadership has never been more pressing. The question remains, will we rise to the occasion, or will we continue to navigate this perilous landscape with outdated and dangerous assumptions?